Good evening. I'd like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of November 26, 2018 to order. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Jacobs. Here. Ross.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
Balmas.
Present.
Hood. Here. 6 present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before I open the floor for public comment, I would like to say thank you to the Gurnee Police Department for a fabulous job Thursday night and Friday and Saturday all weekend. I know between shopping and the kickoff of Holiday in the Park. Did a great job, no incidences, people were happy, good coverage. And a special thank you to Public Works and the Fire Department. The number of calls in the last 24 to 48 hours was astronomical, very, very busy. Everything was done, the streets are beautiful. So thank you for the effort over a long holiday weekend, we appreciate it. And I will open up the floor to public comment. Many of the faces look familiar, so I will remind you this is not a discussion engagement. You're just making comments to the board. If you just state your name, we appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. My name's Elizabeth Hartman. I'm here to raise my concerns about ethylene oxide or ETO emissions in Lake County. And I also wanted to provide some information I found just from various U.S. departments about ethylene oxide and the risk that it poses. So first, my husband and I moved to this area with our 1-year-old son 2 years ago to get away from the pollution of the city, to enjoy kind of a cleaner or simpler life in the rural suburbs. This is rural to us, so. But now as a result of that, we have to worry about our son one day developing cancer or some other health effect from breathing in ethylene oxide that's being emitted from Vantage Specialty Chemicals in Gurnee and also Medline Industries in Waukegan. So my husband and I are here for our son Hunter, for ourselves and our community, to say that we want ethylene oxide emissions eliminated in Lake County. We have the right to clean air, and we deserve real action from our elected officials. Ethylene oxide was strongly suspected to be a human carcinogen based on research dating back to the 1970s and 80s. In fact, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health released a document in 1981 warning of the mutagenic and carcinogenic effects of ETO based on this research. 1981. Speaking of ethylene oxide in this document, they state, quote, safe levels of carcinogens have not been demonstrated, but the probability of developing cancer should be reduced by decreasing exposure, end quote. The National Toxicology Program of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services listed ETO as a, quote, known human carcinogen, end quote, in 2000. Yet the EPA was extremely slow in formally updating its carcinogenic designation. Finally, in 2016, they updated their designation of ETO as a known human carcinogen, yet they still have not lowered ETO limits to reflect this new designation or dedicated themselves to implementing alternatives to ETO. And sadly, progress on this issue comes far too late for many citizens who are being unknowingly and unjustly exposed to this carcinogen. The city of Willowbrook near Sterigenics, another emitter of ETO, has been found to have the second highest cancer rate in the nation, as they have been exposed to this toxin for over 30 years. This finding is not a coincidence. The following is a quote from the EPA itself regarding the effects of ethylene oxide. Quote, long-term exposure to ethylene oxide can irritate the eyes, skin, nose, throat, and lungs, and harm the brain and nervous system, causing effects such as headaches, memory loss, numbness. Studies show that breathing air containing elevated ethylene oxide levels over many years increases the risk of some types of cancers, including cancers of the white blood cells and breast cancer in females, end quote. The EPA goes on to say that, quote, newer studies show that ethylene oxide is a more potent carcinogen than scientists had thought, end quote. The U.S. Occupational Health and Safety Administration states, quote, chronic exposure to ethylene oxide has been associated with the occurrence of cancer, reproductive effects, mutagenic changes, neurotoxicity, and sensitization, end quote. The OSHA fact sheet on ethylene oxide states, quote, ETO is also linked to spontaneous abortion, genetic damage, nerve damage, peripheral paralysis, muscle weakness, as well as impaired thinking and memory, end quote. Regarding the effects of ETO on children, the EPA also states that, quote, for a single year of exposure to ethylene oxide, the cancer risk is greater for children than for adults. This is because ethylene oxide can damage DNA. For everyone, including children, risks would decrease with decreased exposure, end quote. Research shows that ETO causes these effects at emission levels lower than current US standards. Even more alarmingly, the 1981 document from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health referenced earlier, as well as publications from the World Health Organization, indicate that DNA mutations caused by ETO can be passed on from generation to generation. We in Gurnee and the surrounding communities do not want to wait around to be another cancer cluster like Willowbrook in 20 years' time. We want this toxin removed from our community now. We have the right to clean air. We did not choose to breathe in this carcinogen. We were deceived by these companies trying to increase their bottom line. Thankfully, the free press did its due diligence to alert the citizens to this risk, which should have been done by our government years ago. Contrary to statements of biased, quote, scientists in this industry, there are alternatives to ethylene oxide for medical sterilization. It is just that resources need to be expended to completely develop and implement these alternatives, and this will cost the companies like Medline and Vantage money. But the health of our children in our community is more important than some companies' bottom dollar. Will the Village of Gurnee show that it has its community's best interests at heart? We citizens expect our local government to do everything in its power, even when it may be difficult, to remove this carcinogen from our community. We do not want excuses about air monitoring or other information gathering to delay definitive action on this issue. We deserve swift action from our elected officials and demand a formal timeline for when ETO will be removed from our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you could just write your name and address on the sign-up sheet just so we get it right in the minutes, I appreciate it.
My name is Elizabeth Tice. I own a home on Country Club Avenue near Spalding School in Gurnee. I am here because Vantage Specialty Chemicals is emitting ethylene oxide a few blocks from my home. Mayor Kvork and the Board of Trustees have sent a clear and consistent message that they are going to let the EPA and Illinois EPA conduct investigations and regulation of ethylene oxide in our community. The EPA said that they are not going to investigate, but rely on Vantage Specialty Chemicals to self-report emissions and to conduct their own perimeter testing. So the EPA isn't actually going to do anything either. Furthermore, the mayor and the board are not releasing any information on the issue. Most residents don't know the actual emissions from Vantage Specialty Chemicals. A few residents do know Vantage's emissions because of a Freedom of Information Act request. The EPA has set up a website to address ethylene oxide in Lake County, but it has very little information. It does say that Vantage Specialty Chemicals will be adding a second scrubber in February 2019. However, it is misleading in how it phrases the potential cancer risk in Lake County as 101 million or greater. It is misleading because it is likely much, much greater. If our situation is similar to the Willowbrook community, where the EPA studied ethylene oxide emissions from the Sterngenics facility, then our cancer risk would be closer to 6.4 in 1,000, or one cancer case in 156 residents. Of the 23,000 Lake County residents living in the affected zone, there will be 147 cases of cancer due to exposure to ethylene oxide. These are the conclusions I am making with the very little information I have access to. Lake County residents are sitting in their homes trying to piece the information together themselves. It is terrifying to spend your nights trying to determine your family's risk with little or no help from their own village. This is why the upcoming local elections are so important. To the people of Gurnee, 3 of the 6 trustees are up for re-election now. If you are interested in running for the board, you must submit your candidate packet by December 17th. That is 3 weeks from today. Packets are available at elections.illinois.gov, or you can pick up a packet at the Village Hall. Urging our leaders is not enough. We must participate to make change. But candidates must act fast. Among other things, candidates must submit a statement of economic interest to the county and get signatures from more than 130 registered voters. This takes time, so if interested, you must get going now. Additionally, School District 56, which includes the schools near Vantage Specialty Chemicals, has seats on its board up for re-election. And this is true for the surrounding cities. Waukegan has all 9 aldermen on the city council up for re-election. Please, if you are concerned about your neighborhood's well-being, then run for a position. Again, that's elections.illinois.gov. To trustee Greg Garner, Michael Jacobs, and Cheryl Ross, who are up for re-election, I implore you to listen to the people of Gurnee and take action. We need leadership. We need information, not through Freedom of Information Act requests, but presented by leaders who care about their community. We need to start a community dialogue, not one with a blanket statement. Our lawyers told us not to get involved. Please do not disappoint us. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to the upcoming elections. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Ryan Horth, and I have one child at Spalding School and another who should be going there next year. Bear with me here. This is about the ethylene oxide as well. I have a lot to say tonight. I've tried to keep it as short as possible, but I also feel there is a lot to cover, and what I have to say is important. First, I want to speak about Dr. Mary Jane Tita. Medline has retained her expertise in junk science and sent a document to the mayor containing some of her junk science. I believe this document was shared with all trustees. Sterigenics took out full-page ads in the Tribune and Sun-Times featuring her junk science. Dr. Tita is not a renowned scientist. She is renowned only at corporate dinner parties. She is a shining example of much of what is wrong with science today and how industry has poisoned our research literature. SourceWatch, which tracks industry front groups, lists Dr. Tita as a member of the board or science council of 2 industry front groups. A related site, ScienceCorruption.com, lists Dr. Tita's firm, Exponent, as a home for, quote, science for sale grifters. I cannot go into too much detail on her firm, Exponent, because you can literally write a book about all of their misdeeds. And indeed, they feature heavily in David Michael's excellent book, Doubt is Their Product. This is a thoroughly researched and supported book on the doubt manufacturing industry of pseudoscientists who sell their souls to the highest bidder. Michaels is himself an epidemiologist, and the book has received glowing reviews in Science and New Scientist. I highly recommend it for a deeper look at Exponent and the toxic work of the doubt industry. But back to Dr. Tita, there's a name for people like Dr. Tita and her firm, Merchants of Doubt. We have a message for them. We are not buying what you are selling. Unfortunately, Exponent has been moderately successful in helping Ford Motor Company fend off mesothelioma claims. Successful enough that her colleague sent Ford a letter attempting to shake them down for more money. After all, their efforts had saved Ford enormous amounts of money. Dr. Tita has made a lot of money producing bogus research on the risk of asbestos exposure for auto mechanics. And I will tell this story in detail because it features precisely the same tactics that are now being used for ethylene oxide. Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, and GM hired Exponent, and a firm owned by one of Dr. Tita's colleagues at Exponent. By 2016, Ford alone had paid both companies more than $40 million for their work. It's a lot of money, but selling your soul does not come cheap. Their job was to produce bogus research that would claim asbestos in automobile brakes does not cause mesothelioma, despite the science already being settled. The parallels here are obvious, as the science surrounding ethylene oxide is also settled. Dr. Tita's angle was to argue that there were safe levels of exposure, and auto mechanics were exposed to a level not high enough to give them mesothelioma. So here we have the same situation. Dr. Tita has come to the rescue of these companies with claims that there are indeed safe levels of ethylene oxide, just like she did with asbestos in automobile brakes. The science overwhelmingly disagrees. An independent researcher at Duke with more than 40 years' experience in asbestos research said this about Dr. Tita and her colleagues at Exponent. They've published a lot, but they've really produced no new science. 15 years ago, I thought the issue of asbestos risk assessment was pretty much defined. All they've accomplished is to try to generate doubt where really little doubt existed. Dr. Tita co-authored 2 meta-analyses on the risk of cancer from asbestos for auto mechanics. Both papers concluded there was no increased risk, contradicting virtually all other research available. She did this by abusing and misusing meta-analysis. Some of the authors of the papers she included in her analysis complained that their work was misrepresented. Thanks to the torturing of data, the data in one of the papers seemed to indicate that working with asbestos in auto brakes actually lowered your risk of mesothelioma compared to the general population. The editor of the International Journal of Occupational Environmental Health, Dr. David Eagleman, stated that this implausible result is an obvious sign of gross errors in the study. He also labeled Dr. Tita's research, quote, deceptive by design. He described the tactics of Tita and her colleagues thusly: they can throw a lot of things at the wall and hope something sticks with the jury. It forces people like me or other scientists to try to clean up each thing that was thrown at the wall, one at a time. By the end of the day, that can be confusing to a jury or judge. As another example, Australia has a large national healthcare database. Independent scientists ran an analysis of the data in this database and reported that vehicle brake mechanics did indeed have higher rates of mesothelioma than normal. Dr. Tita and her firm were engaged by the auto manufacturers to dispute this finding, so they produced their own analysis with the opposite result. Dr. Eagleman, the journal editor, was curious how they did this, so he and a colleague looked at the data themselves. In a paper titled Corporate Corruption of Science, Another Asbestos Example, he detailed how Dr. Tita and her colleagues played around with the criteria to determine whether a worker was included in their study until it gave the result they wanted. There's a term for this: torturing the data until it confesses. Even worse, the authors of this study failed to disclose that it was commissioned by the lawyers representing the auto manufacturers. This arrangement only came to light as a result of the discovery process in court. The behavior exhibited by Dr. Tita and her colleagues was both unethical and scientific misconduct, and Dr. Eagleman was right to call it corruption. One of Dr. Tita's colleagues objected to Eagleman's use of the word corruption, so he published another comment in a journal where he detailed how vast and wide the corruption ran. He found Dr. Tita's firm, Exponent, was hired by lawyers for the auto manufacturers in 2002, before they had performed any literature searches, reviewed any data, or conducted any research on the topic. With no knowledge of the subject at all, they pledged to testify on behalf of the defense, using research they would produce in the future. So the results of their research were guaranteed before it began. In fact, the lawyers maintained the right to block publication of any research that would harm their case. This is not science. This is total lack of ethics, corruption on a mass scale. This kind of deception has serious consequences. In 2009, the National Cancer Institute published a fact sheet claiming there was no evidence that asbestos from vehicle brakes caused cancer. They cited Dr. Tita's work as support. Dr. Arthur Frank, chair of the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at Drexel University, was alarmed by this. He sent a letter spelling out the absurdity of this claim and insisted it be taken down because asbestos was not banned in the United States, and corporate consumers of the Institute's website could use the claim to justify using asbestos again, causing more deaths. The claim was removed within 2 weeks and replaced with an accurate statement that there is no safe level of asbestos exposure. Globally, Dr. Tita's work has been used to prevent bans on asbestos in developing countries, particularly India and China. Asbestos is still widely used in building materials in these countries. Dr. Eagleman stated bluntly, the real nefarious part of this research is that a lot of people who live in those countries are continuing to be exposed under uncontrolled conditions to asbestos. That's the real horror story here. No doubt, Dr. Tita's dishonest work has caused or contributed to an unfathomable number of deaths worldwide, and will do so for many years to come. I will again turn to the words of Dr. Eagleman. He says, consulting companies like Dr. Tita's have been established to manufacture doubt. However, the products of this process are preventable death and disease, and evasion of company responsibility to compensate those affected. Sadly, for industry, this investment is far cheaper than manufacturing safe products, warning about hazards, or preventing exposures. I wonder, how does someone like Dr. Tita sleep at night knowing your fake research is killing so many people? Well, the pay is probably good enough to purchase a lot of self-delusion, and a total lack of a sense of morality is also helpful. In summarizing my thoughts on Dr. Tita, I would like to say to Medline and Sterigenics, shame on you for bringing this person into our communities. She is not welcome here. These tactics have only multiplied our anger and strengthened our resolve. But thank you for demonstrating to our leaders that you cannot be trusted, and for showing us that you will not work with us in good faith. And to the mayor and the board, I want to emphasize the claims in the document you received from Medline are false and misleading. I obtained this document through a FOIA request because I suspected the companies would use misinformation in private to attempt to control the situation. Dr. Tita is not a renowned expert in this area. She is a hired gun who independent researchers view with disdain. Her job here is to plant the seeds of doubt to prevent action. The IRIS report was not an outlier. The committee that produced the report consisted of many actual renowned scientists in this field. An even larger advisory board consisted of other such researchers. The estimates of risk that are alleged to be so wrong were extracted using standard methods, and neither those methods nor the results are controversial. On the other hand, the methods used by Medline and Dr. Tita are controversial and shameful. They are the same methods that were used by cigarette manufacturers. They should not be trusted. They should be ignored. As an example of this misleading information, Medline's document mentions that ethylene oxide is produced by the human body. They want you to think this chemical is normal. What lies behind this claim is that the human body produces ethylene, and a small amount of that is turned into ethylene oxide. I went through the research literature, and I found that the human body does indeed produce roughly 0.017 grams of ethylene in the average lifetime. And a small fraction of that is converted to ethylene oxide. So maybe 0.0017 grams of ethylene oxide, roughly, who knows. This is negligible, and yet scientists are concerned that even this tiny amount produced by the body likely has a negative impact on our health, though it is likely unavoidable. This amount is so negligible that you realize charlatans like Dr. Tita bring it into the discussion only to mislead and confuse. As these companies speak of the disruption to their business and how damaging it would be to stop using ethylene oxide, we can again look to the example of Ford. They had developed and tested brakes without asbestos in the 1970s, but they decided not to make a change because the cost was too prohibitive. After all, it would cost an extra $1.25 per vehicle for the front brakes alone. Of course, we need to adjust for inflation, so we find that the extra cost was nearly $6 for front brakes in today's dollars, so perhaps $12 per vehicle. This was the prohibitive cost that drove them to expose auto mechanics to cancer for an additional 20-plus years, $12. Today, Ford is still paying for this decision in the form of lawsuits, though with the help of Dr. Tita and her colleagues, their liability has been significantly lower than their responsibility. No doubt the companies involved with ethylene oxide hope that Dr. Tita can work the same magic with their past immoral decisions. The science is clear. No matter what the charlatans Medline brings in tell you, ethylene oxide is mutagenic and causes many different forms of cancer, along with other health problems. As with asbestos, there is no safe level of exposure. We have known it is carcinogenic for 24 years and suspected it was carcinogenic for more than 50 years. And while Medline uses ethylene oxide to sterilize medical products, Vantage uses it for far less essential purposes. It is difficult to find out what exactly Vantage is producing with ethylene oxide at their Gurnee location. However, I can give you an example of something they manufacture with this chemical. The brand name is Liponic Bio EG1. The scientific name is Glycerith 26. It is an ingredient used in cosmetic products. Vantage sells this to makers of cosmetic products and markets it to be included in a range of products, including baby care, hair care, sun care, bath and shower, and skin care products. To make this, they take ordinary glycerin and react it with ethylene oxide in a process called ethoxylation. This reaction makes the resulting product less harsh, but it also sometimes leaves ethylene oxide and dioxane, another carcinogen, in the final product. These carcinogens can make their way onto store shelves, causing unsuspecting consumers to expose themselves to a small amount of carcinogen. So Vantage is using ethylene oxide and exposing us to its risk to make a product that can also contain carcinogens. I'm not sure how anyone could think it is reasonable to allow this to happen in our community. Even more perversely, they market this product as a sustainable, environmentally friendly product, emphasizing that ethylene oxide is derived from corn. This marketing is so absurd, it makes you want to laugh. Yet I am unable to do so because I am unable to laugh at the poisoning of my children and those in the community. I had back and forth discussions this past week with the mayor about our authority to regulate ethylene oxide. I believe I established we do have this authority. The Waukegan City Council has stated they have this authority. I understand the hesitancy to get involved, preferring that any action occur on the state or federal level. But you should understand that if the action we demand does not occur soon, we will expect local leaders to do just that, to lead. We do not accept that this chemical will be used in our community, and we will not accept it. There is no negotiating on this point. And while it is useful to do environmental testing to learn our current exposure, we do not need to wait on this testing because it is irrelevant to our demands. We already know that some amount of ethylene oxide is in our air, and we know that we do not approve of any amount in our air. Thus, we have all the information we need to make a decision. The time for assessment of ethylene oxide ended years ago. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I forgot to say to the last speaker, too, you make sure you fill out the form in the back so we have your name and address so we can get it correctly. Sir, please.
Good evening. My name is Richard Loisel. I live in Pleasant Hill subdivision. I was the 12th house that was built there 23 years ago. I don't have any documents. The only thing I got is stereo strips. 5 years ago, I was told by my physician to go to a dermatologist for a place I had on my forehead. And it was removed by a mole specialist. What they do is they take a slice, freeze it, put it on a microscope, take another slice until it's cleared up. I go every 6 months to the dermatologist. I was there last Wednesday. They took sutures out of my face from the week before, plus my neck at the same time, plus my back. And the week before that was my side. I guess I'm rotting away. Whether it's from the stuff that's in the air or not, I don't know. But the doctor says, I don't know where the stuff is coming from. She says, quit growing those bumps. And I can't. I got about a half a dozen removals on my chest, plus old ones on my back. If it's not from the chemicals, it still needs to be looked into. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else tonight?
Good evening. My name is Yolanta. I've lived in Gurnee for over 17 years, and I live in the Kensington Court community right next to the village, very close by. So I put my thoughts on paper to make sure I didn't omit anything, but here they are. Exactly 24 days ago, on November 2nd, Gurnee and Waukegan residents were first made aware of ethylene oxide emission in our community. Justifiably, this devastating news has caused major alarm and concern among residents. There is absolutely no doubt that ethylene oxide is harmful to humans, and anyone who tells you otherwise, like Dr. Tita from Medline, should not be trusted. The Gurnee community is home to well-educated citizens, comprised of scientists, doctors, statisticians, business executives, lawyers, teachers, and other highly skilled professionals. Over the past 3 weeks, we have done extensive research to understand the detrimental health impacts of long-term exposure to ethylene oxide, and we've concluded that we do not want any amount of this toxic gas in our air. No amount of ETO is safe. I certainly don't want to breathe in any amount, nor do I want my 2 small children, 5 and 6 years old, to be exposed to any amount either. Emitting facilities such as Medline and Vantage should not be located next to schools or nearly densely populated residential areas such as Gurnee or Waukegan. The fact that they have been emitting ETO over the past several years without our knowledge is shameful and completely unacceptable. But the past is in the past, and all we can do now is move forward, demanding immediate action. If we knew then what we know now, we would have advocated in the same manner we are advocating today. Medline and Vantage have broken our trust. Only after journalists reported on the dangers of ETO emissions in Lake County in early November have both businesses volunteered to install scrubbers. Where were the scrubbers 2 years ago? Both businesses are now volunteering to install scrubbers to give the false appearance of acting responsibly. But the reality is, when no one was watching, they acted irresponsibly. As more and more residents have found out about ETO emissions in our community, I am hearing comments such as, "We're thinking about moving." I even seen a few houses up for sale in East Gurnee, close to Vantage. If individuals of financial means decide to relocate, who is going to fight for clean air for the individuals who do not have the financial luxury of relocating? The only entities who should be relocating are Vantage and Medline. They should not be allowed to operate so close to schools or residential areas. To be perfectly frank, residents are considering relocating because they lack confidence in the Environmental Protection Agency to take swift and appropriate action. The EPA's current leader, Andrew Wheeler, is a coal industry lobbyist who regularly denies environmental science and has no interest in protecting the public. On the contrary, he has been nominated to protect the interest of companies like Vantage and Medline. The EPA kept our community in the dark for 2 years before being exposed by the Chicago Tribune recently. Now they are telling us they are unable to competently measure amounts of ETO in the environment. We are not comfortable with placing our faith solely in the EPA to protect us. As Mahatma Gandhi once famously said, "Truth is by nature self-evident. As soon as you remove the cobwebs of ignorance that surround it, it shines clear." We are here tonight, banded together as a community, standing before you, our local leaders, attempting to remove the cobwebs of ignorance on ethylene oxide emissions in Lake County. In the face of doubts being cast by the offending facilities, we plead with you to err on the side of caution and to ban ETO from our air. The Village of Gurnee does have the legal authority to ban the use of ETO in our community under the Illinois Constitution. Ethylene oxide is indisputably a cancer and reproductive hazard, and we need to protect the health of our citizens by banning its use in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just, one moment, state your last name? You didn't give your last name for the record.
Yolanta Pomiatlo.
Thank you. And then if everybody could sign in the back so we can get the minutes correct. All right, anyone else?
Evening, my name is Celeste Flores. I'm a Gurnee resident, and I'm also here to talk about ethanol oxide, but I want to take a moment, with the storm and everything happening, just remind us of nature and how we don't know. We are not the ones that control it. Climate controls us, and for millions of years, this land was sacred to the First Nation people of the Potawatomi, and they took care of the land, and I hope that all of us will take that time to really take care of it and think about ETO is about the climate. It's about us taking care of our neighbors, of ourselves, just like how the First Nation people did it. I would love for us to continue that and continue lifting up those that are most marginalized by climate and the effects of it. And I recently, right before this meeting, came across an article that spoke about the Illinois EPA and the cuts that they've had since Rauner's administration and even before that. And I think it's very important. I see on the website that our village is looking at leadership from IEPA and the US EPA, but the IEPA has lost 190 full-time employees between July of 2014 and December 2017. The air, water, and land inspection of facilities dropped 11%, and violation notices from those inspections dropped 40%. So I'm here today. I want to know how the village is going to be leading this, because if we're looking at IEPA and the US EPA, they've clearly dropped the ball. And I am appreciative of a website that gives us some information, but it doesn't say what the next, it puts everything on the US EPA and the IEPA, and both of those have not been working for us. You know, Waukegan and Gurnee residents have been exposed to this carcinogen, and I'm here to ask for this board specifically to implement our own air quality monitoring. Willowbrook hired a consultant firm to do this when they found out about ETO, and I can email you guys that document. I want you guys to write a letter to the IEPA and the US EPA to demand that they do air and groundwater testing. We know that our federal representatives have done this, but I think it would be very powerful coming from the village as well. and to write a letter to the IDPH and the state asking for a cancer cluster study. We won't know until down the road if we actually have one, but we need to start doing that study now. We need to know who's being affected by this and if this, how this is affecting our community's health and livelihood. And to host a public meeting, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation, and I just want everyone to be on the same page. I want us to hear from the board, from these other organizations, from the US EPA, from the ILPA, to actually come and tell us the truth and not just put something on a website with an email address. I mean, we need faces. We're here because we're concerned, because this is our livelihood, and we know it's yours as well. So it would be really to the best interest for there to be a public meeting that is also available in Spanish for our residents that prefer to speak in Spanish and any other language. I know in Waukegan they also have a huge population of Filipinos. I'm not too sure about the ethnic or how people identify in Gurnee. I've never looked that up actually. But you know, I think having this kind of meeting for transparency would go a long way with residents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the floor to public comment and move on to the approval of the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas. Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the October 29th, 2018 and November 12th, 2018 Village Board meetings. Item number 2, approval of bid award for fuel purchase to the low bidder, Gas Depot, at a supplier discount price of 0.0310 cents per gallon for unleaded gasoline and a supplier markup price of 0.0135 cents per gallon for biodiesel fuel. Item number 3, approval of payroll for period ending November 9, 2018 in the amount of $806,683.75. Item number 4, approval of bills for period ending November 26, 2018 in the amount of $366,327.24.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read into the record? Motion by trustee Ross, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas. Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Move on to petitions and communications. Nothing
Just a
tonight.
reminder, we have a Village Board meeting next Monday as well, so back-to-back board meetings.
All right, any other reports?
No,
Old business?
not tonight.
All right, going to move on to new business. Item number 1, approval of ordinance 2018-76,
76?
abating the tax heretofore levied for the year 2017 to pay debt service on $9,995,000, general obligation bond series 2011, 2011 of the Village of Gurnee, Lake County, Illinois. Our debt payment on this would be $1,199,000.
Sure. So this is our annual debt service abatement that we do every year. As you know, we don't levy a property tax in the Village of Gurnee, so any debt as well as pension obligations are paid directly from the general fund. This obligation here was the Series 2011 Gurnee Mills redevelopment project, primarily the Macy's shell construction. As the mayor mentioned, it's nearly $1.2 million. And it'll be paid off in December 2022. And then also just a reminder, the Park District debt service payment, we just have one more left on that. So next December, Park District will be paid off as well, which will free up about $380,000.
All right, do I have a motion from a trustee? Motion by trustee Thorstensen, second by trustee Garner to abate property tax. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
6 aye.
All right, says 22 years now without property tax?
Since 2000, so 18 years, will be 19 years.
All right, good work. All right, item number 2, approval of ordinance 2018-77, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for an emergency water system interconnection between the Village of Gurnee and the City of Waukegan.
Sure. So as you know, our water comes from CLC Jawa, Lake Michigan Water. In addition to that, we have 2 backup wells, one down in Heather Ridge and one at Fire Station number 1, as well as an emergency connection to the City of Waukegan's water system. That's located up at Sunset and Northwestern Avenues where those 2 systems tie together. It's been beneficial to both communities as the Jawa system ages. They've had to take the system down more frequently, so we take water from Waukegan, turn on our backup wells to supply the community water during those instances. And Waukegan during the winter, from time to time, has ice buildup on their intake when Jawa doesn't. So from time to time, Waukegan will start to take water from us. This relationship and the maintenance of the interconnection up there is governed through intergovernmental agreement. Was first approved in late 1996, had a 20-year term, so that agreement has expired. We were unaware of that, so we actually discovered that, pulled it out, took a look at it. The majority of it remains the same. There weren't too many changes. We updated it a little bit. Attorneys from both communities took a look at it. They were fine with it. Some of the highlights, another 20-year term with the option to extend another 20 years. The cost of water for either community would be the current Jawa rate plus 10%. That way the village isn't paying Waukegan's rate that they charge their residents, and the same with Waukegan, not paying the Gurnee rates, so we just pay the Jawa rate plus 10%. And then just went through and updated definitions to better identify the shared maintenance costs of the interconnection. So the rest of it remained pretty much the same. Waukegan's going to take it to their Public Works Committee in early December, and then to their full city council. And then after both communities approve it, it'll need to go through Jawa, since that's our water supplier. I've talked with Daryl at Jawa, and he doesn't see any issues with it. So we'll put it before the executive committee and then the full board in Jawa after both Gurnee and Waukegan approve it.
Questions? Always got to have a plan B. All right, motion by trustee Ballmer, second by trustee Thorstensen. Roll call, please. Andy?
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood. 6 aye.
All right, motion carries. That's all our new business for tonight. I'll reopen the floor to public comment. If anybody who didn't get a chance to speak before would like to speak now. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Motion by trustee Jacobs, second by trustee Balmas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.